She was standing in the middle of his office, not outside, not on the street, not across from a restaurant window, inside, on the 14th floor, past security, past 3 locked doors, past everything Arthur Whitfield had paid a fortune to make impenetrable. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, yellow coat, dark eyes, standing perfectly still in the center of his office like she had always belonged there. Arthur's coffee hit the floor. "How did you get in here?" She didn't answer. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a single photograph, and placed it on his desk. Then she walked to the window, looked down at the street below, and waited. Arthur's hands were shaking when he picked up the photo. It was old, faded at the edges, taken at night, under fluorescent light. A young woman, a bus station, a pregnancy test held in both hands, and a man walking away in the background without looking back. Arthur recognized the man immediately. It was him, 24 years younger, cheaper suit, same cold walk. He looked up from the photograph. The girl was gone. The window was open. They were on the 14th floor. Arthur ran to the window and looked down. Nothing. No one. Just the ordinary street below, moving like nothing had happened. He stood there for a long time, the photograph trembling in his grip, the wind coming through the open window and doing nothing to cool the sweat running down the back of his neck. His assistant knocked and opened the door. "Mr. Whitfield, your 9 o'clock is here." He didn't turn around. "Cancel it." "Sir, it's the Harlow Group. They flew in from—" "Cancel everything." He closed the window, sat down, stared at the photograph, and for the first time in 24 years, Arthur Whitfield let himself remember the thing he had spent a fortune trying to forget. Her name was Claire Mercer. She was 22 when he met her, a waitress at a restaurant he used to frequent when he was still nobody, still hungry, still scraping, still the kind of man who needed to believe charm could substitute for character. Claire had both, charm and character. She was the kind of woman who made a room feel warmer just by walking into it. She remembered your name, your order, the thing you mentioned once in passing that you never expected anyone to told himself he loved her. Maybe he did. Or maybe he loved the version of himself she seemed to see, the version that hadn't yet done anything he couldn't take back. Then the pregnancy test changed everything. He remembered standing in that bus station, watching her face and doing the math. Not the emotional math, the strategic math, the calculation of what a child would cost him, not in money, but in momentum, in trajectory, in the clean upward line he had drawn for his life. He put $3,000 in an envelope. He held it out. He didn't look at her face when she took it. He walked out of that bus station and he kept walking and he never looked back. Not once. By the time his cab reached his apartment, he had started rearranging the story in his head. She hadn't been serious. It had been casual. She would be fine. People were fine all the time. He was very good at that, rearranging stories. 24 years of practice had made him exceptional at it. He looked down at the photograph on his desk. Apparently, someone had kept the original version. He picked up his phone and called Marcus Webb. Marcus Webb was the kind of man who existed in the space between what was legal and what was necessary. 30 years in private investigation, former federal consultant, a face that looked like it had heard every confession imaginable, and it stopped being surprised by any of them. Arthur told him everything, the girl, the photograph, the open window on the 14th floor. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. A child got into your building, past your security team, past biometric entry, into your private office. Yes. And then disappeared from a 14th floor window. Yes. And you want me to find her? I want you to find out who sent her. Another pause. I'll call you in 48 hours. He called back in 16. Arthur, I need you to listen carefully and I need you to stay calm. Just tell me. I pulled every record I could find. School enrollment, hospital registration, city census data, foster care documentation, immigration records going back a decade. Marcus stopped. That little girl does not exist on paper. Not in this city, not in this state. I cannot find a single official record that confirms she is a living person. Arthur's chest tightened. But the woman in your photograph, Claire Mercer, I found her. A long silence opened up between them like a wound. She was admitted to St. Augustine's women's shelter in the spring of 2003. She passed away that autumn. The cause listed was complications. The file is sparse. What I can tell you is that she had no next of kin listed, no emergency contact. She was buried in a municipal cemetery in the East Quarter. Arthur said nothing. There's one more thing. Marcus's voice dropped half a register. Her intake form at the shelter, under dependents. Arthur closed his eyes. She listed a daughter, 18 months old at the time of admission. The daughter was placed into foster care after Claire's death. After that, the trail goes quiet for years. Sealed records, standard procedure for minors. Arthur, wherever that little girl is today, she would be 24 years old. Arthur sat in total silence for what felt like a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Find her, Marcus. I already did. The address Marcus sent him was not what Arthur had expected. He had built a version of this person in his head during the drive over. Someone damaged, someone who needed something, someone he could write a check for and walk away from cleanly, the way he had walked away from everything else that made him uncomfortable. The address was a law firm, 11th floor of a building downtown, brass lettering on frosted glass, the kind of office that communicated without saying a word that the person inside it had nothing to prove to anyone. The receptionist told him Miss Mercer was expecting him. He stopped walking. She's expecting me? The receptionist smiled pleasantly and gestured toward a set of double doors. Arthur pushed them open. The office was clean, minimal. A desk, 2 chairs, a wall of windows looking out over the city. A child's drawing pinned to one corner of the bookshelf, the only personal item in the room. Behind the desk sat a woman, 24 years old. Dark coat, Claire's eyes impossibly deep, Claire's posture perfectly straight, but something else entirely in the set of her jaw, something forged rather than inherited, something that did not bend. And standing beside her chair in a yellow coat, completely unbothered, was the little girl. Arthur looked at the child. The child looked back at him with the flat, fearless patience of someone who had been told exactly how this meeting would go and had believed every word. Arthur looked back at the woman. She didn't stand up to greet him. Sit down, Mr. Whitfield. He sat. My name is Nadia Mercer. I think you already know that. And before you say anything, I want you to understand something very clearly. She folded her hands on the desk. I did not come here for an apology. I did not come here for acknowledgement or guilt or whatever version of remorse a man like you performs when he's finally cornered. I don't need your money, and I don't need your name. She reached into a drawer and placed a document on the desk between them. I came here because I am a property attorney, and 6 weeks ago my firm finalized the acquisition of the Harlow building on 5th Avenue. Arthur's eyes dropped to the document. The words came into focus slowly, then all at once. Which is the building your company has leased its primary offices in for the last 11 years. Arthur's mouth went dry. Effective the 1st of next month, your lease renews under revised terms, 40% increase, standard market adjustment clause which you signed and apparently never read carefully enough. She pushed the document an inch closer to him. You have 30 days to countersign or vacate. The silence in the room was enormous. Arthur looked at the little girl again. She was drawing something on a small notepad, completely absorbed, as if the demolition of a man's carefully constructed world was simply background noise. That's my daughter, Nadia said. Her name is Clara. She's named after her grandmother. Arthur's throat tightened. She never knew her grandmother. Claire died when I was 4. I grew up in 3 different foster homes. I taught myself to read using books I found in donation boxes. I put myself through school on scholarships and overnight shifts and the very specific kind of fury that comes from knowing exactly what was taken from you and exactly who took it. She leaned back in her chair, completely composed. I don't want you to feel sorry for me, Mr. Whitfield. I want you to understand that everything I have, I built, without your name, without your money, without a single thing from you. A pause. I simply wanted you to know that the building you walk into every morning, the one with your name on the lease, the one you have operated out of for over a decade, the smallest, coldest smile crossed her face, belongs to your daughter now. Arthur opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Every prepared sentence, every boardroom-tested response, every rearranged story he had ever constructed dissolved completely. He looked at this woman, this composed, unbreakable woman who had his eyes and Claire's spine, and he felt something he had no strategy for. Not guilt, not grief, though those were there too, pressing up from somewhere deep. What he felt, sitting in that chair, in that office, in that building that now belonged to the daughter he had abandoned before she was born, was smallness. The specific, irreversible smallness of a man who had spent his entire life mistaking the absence of consequences for the absence of truth. Nadia stood up. The meeting is over. She picked up Clara's notepad and glanced at the drawing. A small smile, a real one, just for a second, crossed her face. She showed it to Clara, who nodded seriously, apparently satisfied with her work. Arthur stood slowly. He looked at Nadia one more time. She was already looking at something on her desk. The meeting was over. He had been processed and filed. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. He didn't know why he stopped. There was nothing left to say. Nothing that would land right, nothing that would sound like exactly what it was. Too late and authored entirely by shame rather than by love. But he stopped anyway. Nadia spoke without looking up. "Close the door on your way out, Mr. Whitfield." He closed the door. He stood in the hallway for a moment, the building humming quietly around him, her building now, and he thought about a bus station in the rain, a girl with a pregnancy test and a trembling chin, an envelope, a walk, a cab, a story he had been rearranging ever since. He thought about the $3,000, his number for a human life, and he looked at what that life had built without him. A law firm on the 11th floor, a daughter named after a grandmother she never got to meet, a little girl in a yellow coat who had walked past 14 floors of security and stood in the center of his world like she owned it, because Arthur understood now, she did. Not the building, not the lease, not the 40%. She owned the part of his world that mattered, the part he had tried to buy off for $3,000. The part that had kept growing without him in shelters and foster homes and donation box books and overnight shifts into something so much larger than anything he had ever built. That was the thing about what you abandoned. It didn't stay small just because you needed it to. It didn't disappear just because you walked away. It waited. It grew. It learned your name, learned your building, learned the clause in your lease you never read carefully enough. And then one day, on its own timeline, in its own way, with a little girl in a yellow coat as its opening move, it walked through your door. Arthur Whitfield paid the lease increase, every month, on time, without a word. Nadia Mercer made partner before she turned 26, and Clara, named after her grandmother she never got to meet, who died alone in a shelter with $3,000 and a daughter she raised for 4 years with everything she had. Clara kept the yellow coat. She wore it every single day, because her mother had told her what it meant. "It means we see you," her mother had said, "even when you think no one does, even when you think you got away. We see you, and we remember everything." If this story moved something in you, you already know what it stirred up. Drop one word in the comments that describes how Arthur made you feel. Just one word. Let's see which one takes over.